In this lesson, we'll cover the system browser and the zones we just created. So in a previous lesson, we created zones from spaces, and the spaces were originally developed from rooms. How do we go about viewing information in our model, such as zones? Well, one method is if you have a schedule, you could browse to that schedule to see this information. So for example, if I scroll down in the project browser in the lower left to schedules, I have an HVAC zone schedule. And I can double click that and I can see the zones 1 through 4, the perimeter, and the gross area of each zone. Now I can display other columns of information as well for volume and other types of calculations that can be used for various analysis of each zone. Maybe you want to see which spaces belong to each zone. Well, another way to view that information is through the system browser. So let's go back to our previous view. It was the mechanical HVAC floor plan 1-mechanical. The system browser by default is turned off. To turn the system browser on, let's go to the View tab and then all the way to the right to the User Interface dropdown. Go ahead and click it and then check mark System Browser. When you display the system browser, you see a variety of things. Right now, we're looking at systems. And I could see mechanical, piping, electrical. We have no systems because we really didn't create any yet. And if you click the system drop down to the right of view, you're going to have an option called zones. Go ahead and click zones. Now you're listing the zones we created. Now you do have one called default, meaning every Revit project you create does have a default zone. And by default, all your spaces belong to that default zone unless you create new zones and assign those spaces to them. Hence what we did in a previous lesson. So to see the spaces that are in zone 1, I can click the plus to the left of it. And if you hover over zone 1, it'll highlight on the actual model each of those elements. And you can mouse over each one and it'll actually highlight those on the actual model itself. Expand zone 2. Click on zone 2 and you see zone 2. Same thing with zone 3. And same thing with zone 4. Or I could individually click and you could see each of the spaces. But the system browser lets you actually view from a hierarchy standpoint, in this case, all of your zones and all of the spaces that belong to each zone. Now you do have the control to resize and to add or remove columns to the system browser. So as a review, in this lesson, we looked at the system browser and zones. We first started off by looking at a zone schedule to actually see the zones in their area and perimeter, for example. But we wanted to see more about what spaces belong to each zone. So we enabled the system browser by going to the View tab and then the User Interface dropdown and turning on the system browser. From the system browser, we changed the view option to zones, and then we're able to see the actual zones and all of the spaces aligned to each zone.